All right, hello, and thank you for joining us today. All right, so again, hello, and thank you for taking the time out of your schedule to listen to this important information that we have to share with you. On behalf of the USDA Agricultural Marketing Services, we would like to welcome you to the 2021 Farmers Market and Local Food Promotion Program General Terms and Conditions Training. I am Soemi Ramos, and with me is Tyler Hawkins. We are the team leads of the Farmers Market and Local Food Promotion Program and facilitators of this training. This session will run for about 60 minutes. We have a variety of grant recipients of both programs components, LFPP and FMPP. Part of our audience of this training will include program staff, financial staff, authorities, fiscal agents, large and very small organizations. For some of you, this is your first federal grant, while others have managed many grants before. That being said, our audience is very diverse. The goal is to make the training relevant for everyone. The Grants Management Specialist is the member of the USDA who sent you the Save the Date email. It is your point of contact for essentially everything pertaining to your grant, including payments, pre-approvals, reports, and technical assistance. Today, I will provide an overview of the terms and conditions. I trust that each of you have read them. Therefore, in the interest of time, I'm not going to read them out to you. While this presentation is an overview, please remember the full terms and conditions apply to your grant. The link to access them, as well as the cover page, are on the screen. The general terms and conditions are used by nearly a dozen of grant programs, one of them being FMLFPP. Therefore, if something is unclear, it may be helpful to refer back to the FMLFPP request for application or the RFA, which provide more specific guidance regarding FMLFPP specific, or contact your assigned grants management specialist for clarification. The Notice of Award Provisions section incorporates the terms and conditions. Grantees have asked if the terms and conditions are the only rules they must follow. The answer is no. For example, 2 CFR is a comprehensive set of regulations, also known as the Unit for Guidance. That also applies. Today's presentation is not a grants management 101 course, but rather focused on the terms and conditions. Moving forward, it will be helpful to have the terms and conditions handy during this call if you plan to highlight any sections. So on the agenda, this is our agenda, and in terms of time, like I mentioned, I'm not going to cover every section of the terms and conditions, but rather focus on those that tends to generate more questions. So let's start with section number 2, the financial management portion. So all recipients are required to establish and maintain written financial management and internal control procedures, as explained in 2 CFR 200, 302, and 303 respectively. We cannot stress enough how important it is to have a thorough financial system in place, such as effective policies, procedures, personnel trained, verification, etc., to identify and account for expenses, track match, program income, etc. Additionally, internal controls are required to maintain effective control and provide reasonable assurance that the award is managed in compliance with the federal statute and the terms and conditions. Internal controls apply not only to financials, but the award overall. Some organizations submitted various procedures during the pre-award activities. Please do not assume that we review them for accuracy or adequacy. Each organization is unique, therefore develops and monitors their own policies and procedures. As you can tell, this is very important. Key highlights include track expenses to make sure funds are being used according to the federal laws, regulations, and terms and conditions. To be required to report on the use of funds. Ensure all expenses are reasonable, necessary, allocable, and allowable. This includes the federal share, matching funds, and program income if applicable. Avoid commingling funds, especially when you have other grant funding sources, direct or pass-through. Ensure accurate allocation. Ensure separation of powers and check and balances to prevent fraud and maintain integrity of the financial and performance data. Keep records to substantiate all expenses. These include procurement files, contracts, time and effort reports, invoices, receipts, etc. Notify your assigned specialist if you experience financial management problems. For those organizations that spend $750,000 or more on federal award during their fiscal year, just as a reminder to have your audit done and uploaded on time. Cost sharing and matching. Cost share is commonly referred to as match. If an expense is allowable, it is unallowable. If an expense is unallowable, it is unallowable across the board for the federal and match. For example, if Home Depot offers to donate seeds, the value of the seeds cannot be recorded as match because seeds are a production expense, which is unallowable. You should have all the matching sources identified by now. You will need to secure prior approval from us if your matching source changes. The FMLFPP terms and conditions prohibit program income from being used as match. We cannot stress enough the importance of having strong financial management and internal control policies and procedures. Let's move now to our subrecipient monitoring and management. Oops. So if the recipient uses subaward, it must enter into a formal written agreement with each subrecipient that addresses the arrangements for meeting the programmatic, administrative, financial, and reporting requirements of the grant, including those necessary to ensure compliance with all applicable federal regulations and policies. This is important and it will avoid any future misunderstanding. Specifically, the recipient is responsible for including the requirements of the applicable AMS general terms and conditions in its subaward agreements, as well as the provisions required under the 2 CFR 200-3-1. Recipients must include subaward activities in all performance and financial reports. In general, the requirements that apply to the award recipient flow down to the subrecipient. Sticking with the theme of money, let's continue on section 4 about payments. All right, so a popular question is, how do I get paid? The answer is submit a payment or a claim via the Payment Management System, or PMS, and the Grant Solution System. These are two new systems in our agency. As of November 2021, AMS is transitioning all agreements from EasyFed grants to Payment Management System and Grant Solution System. These are online grants management systems that you will be using during your period of performance. PMS is the financial system. This will be used to submit the amount requested for each advance or reimbursement request, and the SF-425 the federal financial report, which are submitted annually and when closing a grant. Grant solution system will be used to monitor the performance of your grant, meaning that through this system, you will need to submit the requirement payment documentation as are the SF-270 request for advance or reimbursement form and the AMS grant program worksheet. Also, this grant solution system will be used to submit the required annual and financial performance report. AMS grant recipients will receive email from the grants management specialist or members of our agency with instructions to complete their PMS registration. You will receive a PIN number that is needed to complete your registration. Each new grant recipient awarded in the fiscal year 2021 has been registered in Grant Solutions system already. If you need to change the AOR or the project director listed, please contact your assigned grants management specialist for assistance. So to create and submit a claim, complete and attach the SF-270 and the AMS worksheet in the Grant Solutions system. Also, you will need to access the PMS system to input the amount requested. If the documentation submitted via Grant Solution is approved, your grants management specialist will go to the PMS system and release the funds, which will trigger the direct deposit or electronic transfer of funds to your organization's bank account listed on SAM.gov profile. Screenshots of both forms are in the slides for reference. The worksheet is specifically required for FMLFPP grantees. We will discuss the worksheet on the next slide. So this is the location where you can find the required forms. They are available in our website and under the questions how to administer the award tab and how do I request a payment request. So you must submit the worksheet with the SF-270. We recommend submitting an Excel file rather than a PDF. Sometimes grantee will inadvertently change the formula. This is easier to detect and fix if submitted as an Excel file. The purpose of the expense worksheet is to list your expenses. It also serves as a tool to pair expenses to the records source documents, which is helpful in the event of record checks, this review, or an audit. The top is self-explanatory. The bottom portion is where you list each expense included in the payment request. Moving left to right, the date of the expense must fall within the time period of the request. A payee is the entity or person in a company that was paid for the service or goods. This quick note here, this cannot be a Visa or a MasterCard. The amount is the amount that you are requesting from the federal portion of the award. The next column, the amount of matching funds, is where match amounts are entered. From a practical perspective, some organizations copy and paste the info from their general ledger on the expense worksheet. The budget section or cells have the same drop-down categories option as your project narrative. The options shown on the screen are just examples. For each line item expense, select the category that corresponds to the category on your approved budget. For example, if requesting payments for an industrial mixer, include in the approved project narrative as equipment, you select equipment on this expense worksheet. The notes section is used to briefly explain the expense and pair to the approved budget. Usually 5 to 10 words is sufficient. The last column asks if you have records, such as receipts, payrolls, invoices, to submit upon request, select yes or no. Please keep in mind that you must keep the original receipt showing items purchased, etc. in your grant file. A credit card statement alone will not be sufficient. You may insert additional rows as necessary to accommodate more expenses. If a row are inserted, be sure the formulas are extended to capture all rows entries. And the totals, bottom left on the worksheet, reflect all expenses. We mention this because this is where grantees tend to short themselves. Finally, the federal funds requested on the worksheet should match the amount on the SF-270. Grantees in the past have requested an example. This example shows the expenses on the top and the PDF version of the SF-270 on the bottom. This example is for the full request. No further funds previously requested. Reimbursement, no program income, match of $10,000, and further fund requested of $25,000. As you can see, the time period and the total further portion amount are the same. Here are a few notes to keep in mind. Records do not need to be routinely submitted with each claim, but must be available upon request. Generally speaking, we will let you know if records are needed once we review a claim. You must make at least one drawdown within the first year of the grant and submit future requests at reasonable intervals thereafter. If a drawdown is not made within the time frame, it could result in a reduction of your funding. From a practical standpoint, most grant recipients submit payments quarterly, and some more frequently and some less, depending on their cash flow needs. Lastly, funds are dispersed electronically. Checks are not mailed. Our system disperses funds to the bank account on file with your SAM.gov registration. We recommend all grant recipients be sure their SAM.gov account is active and show the correct and current bank account information. It takes a few weeks for updates to sync to our payment system, so please time accordingly. As a reminder, SAM.gov is a free service. So the next topic we have program income. Program income is the gross income earned by your organization that is directly generated by a supported activity or earned as a result of the federal award during the period of performance. You can find this information in the 2 CFR 200.80. The recipients may retain interest earned on payments deposited in interest-bearing accounts up to $500 per year for administrative expenses. Any additional interest earned must be remitted annually to the Federal Payment Management System, which handles payments to the Treasury. On the next topic, we have program income. Program income is the gross income earned by your organization that is directly generated by a supported activity or earned as a result of the federal award during the period performance. A few of your projects will earn program income. Be sure to follow the 2 CFR 200, 307, and 305, and have procedures to track and use those funds appropriately. While the federal default is a deductive method for FMLFPP, grants follow the additive method, meaning that your grant amount is not reduced if project income is generated or earned. The most common form of program income earned by FMLFPP recipients is when they host a training, conference, and charges a fee to attend. When the conference is funded by FMLFPP, then the fees collected are considered program income. Any program income must be reported on the SF-270 and the SF-425 forms. Okay, so section number 7, we have procurements. Recipient might acquire commercially available goods and service in connection with a project. In doing so, the recipient must use its own documented procurement procedures, which may reflect applicable state, local, and tribal laws and regulations, provided that the procurement conform to applicable federal law and the standards found at 2 CFR 200-318 through 2 CFR 200-326. And with that, I'm going to pass it to my colleague, Tyler Hawkins.
Thank you, Zoemi. This next section, we're going to discuss allowable and unallowable costs and activities. In this slide, we're going to give some specific examples of what costs that are common on federal awards and if they might be allowable and unallowable under the FMLFPP programs. Advisory councils are always unallowable. Alcoholic beverages are always unallowable, and this is we get this more often than you might think, and this is it's a pretty standard rule across the federal grants. Building and construction is unallowable. We do allow you to rent the cost of a building space, but construction of new facilities will always be unallowable. Contingency provisions are always unallowable, including working capital. Contributions and donations, those are unallowable. We want you to, keep the grant funds within the project. EBT, I know several of our programs and projects involve taking SNAP payments from customers. That's allowable, but spending money directly on EBT machines will be unallowable. Entertainment, we do realize that meetings, there will be some forms of entertainment sometimes at meetings and conferences, which is allowable, but spending directly on entertainment unless it's directly related to the project objectives is generally unallowable. And in either case, we'll need prior written approval from AMS. General purpose equipment is generally unallowable to purchase as well as lease to own. If you are purchasing or if you are needing to acquire equipment for your grant, we do prefer that you lease this equipment if it's general purpose and not specifically for the project. If it is special purpose equipment, that is allowable. But it will need to be included in the approved budget, or if after application time, prior written approval will need to be sought from AMS. And for food safety equipment, we do have a maximum of $6,500 that you can spend for this equipment. There we go. All right, to continue on allowable and unallowable expenses, production items, as far as the direct production of food items, is generally unallowable. Fundraising is unallowable, and of course, lobbying. I know, different organizations often participate in lobbying activities, and unfortunately, federal funds are not allowable for lobbying purposes. Meals are unallowable for business meals, conference breakfasts, when duplicating the per diem, or if no arduous conditions exist. If you're in travel status, meals are allowable, or if they are necessary to maintain the continuity of a meeting and arduous conditions exist, which means if food is absolutely necessary, for the health and safety of everyone, if you're in, a remote location or whatnot, that's kind of what arduous conditions is talking about. That would be allowable, but those circumstances are generally rare. Membership costs, civic or community organization costs are unallowable, but if you or your staff wish to join a professional organization or a business or technical organization related to your organization's project work, that's allowable. AMS does allow pre-award expenses up to 90 days prior to the start of the project period. Those should be requested in the application budget, or written approval should be requested after. Selling and marketing expenses, promoting the image of the organization, creating a general logo, hiring a marketer or a graphic design specialist to come up with startup related imagery or marketing, that's going to be unallowable. But if the marketing costs are directly related to the project, that's allowable. Incentives are one of those gray areas, but there are different grant programs that do allow food related and SNAP incentives, but FMLFPP, that's kind of that outside of the legislative scope of our program, so we don't allow those food related incentives, including coupons and vouchers. Printing and distributing coupons is allowable. To continue selling and marketing expenses, as I mentioned before, it's kind of outside of the scope of our programs to market the health value of food and to promote, general health and nutrition advice. That's going to be unallowable. Sponsorships are unallowable. And food for displays, tastings, and cooking demos, this is an area where FMPP does allow these kind of expenses with prior approval, but LFPP does not. And food assistance programs, promoting a farmer's market or any other local food business, or sharing the acceptance of a food assistance program, examples SNAP, WIC, etc., as a payment method, those are allowable. And one statement we're required to share with you is that federal funds are not to be expended for telecommunications equipment or services provided by the Huawei Technology Company, ZTE Corporation, or any of their subsidiaries or affiliates. And this is at the U.S. government level. There's sanctions on these companies, so please do be sure that you're not including funds for doing business with these organizations. In the next section that we are going to discuss is prior approval. When to seek prior approval. That's a common question that we get, is when to reach out to us and to the agency to make sure that you're in compliance with the terms and conditions and other requirements of your grant. Section 9.1, changes in key personnel. If there's, for example, a change in project director or a change in the authorized representative or any other person that was named on your project budget, that'll need to be sought, approval will need to be sought with AMS. Scope or objectives changes, referring again back to the original approved scope in the application. If anything, if you foresee any changes to that scope, please do seek approval from us. If you need a no-cost extension on your grant, we know that especially Things happen where staffing might change or projects might get delayed for some reason, and that's fine. We do allow a one-time no-cost extension, but we ask that you do request that extension at least 10 days before the grant ends, and it does need to be for completing project activities, not solely to just spend up remainder of any unused funds. If you do have a budget change, if there's a threshold of $250,000, if your award exceeds this amount and the amount that you need to reallocate exceeds 10% of this amount, then you'll need to request prior approval for any budget changes in any direct cost categories. And also, if you do have a budget period before a payment request, please make sure that your grants management specialist has approved the budget amendment request prior to submitting payment. Contractual or subaward changes. If there's any changes to a subawardee, or you decide to contract out with another organization for any of the project activities, please do seek approval from us. If your organization is going to change its legal name or address, that'll require a SAM.gov update, as well as an update with us to make sure that we have our records correct and know how to contact you. Excuse me. And cost share and match. If there's going to be any change to any cost share or match source that was indicated on the original application, that'll need to be sought. Approval will need to be sought for that as well. And we'll move on to the next section, 10.0. Another area where we have a lot of questions usually is, how do I report on the performance of our activities and our financials? Here's a reporting schedule table. This is broken down by types of project. LFPP planning projects are 2 years in length. So period of performance, of course, for all grants starting in fiscal year 2021 was September 30th, 2021. And for the LFPP planning projects, this is when your first report will be due, as well as the final report after the end of the second period of performance. And some of you may be new, whether you're new or existing recipients to federal awards, you used to get 90 days to turn in a final report, and that has been extended to 120 days. For FMPP and LFPP implementation projects, those are 3 years in duration. And here's the breakdown of the schedule of when you would turn in reports. Also do note that once again, for the final report, you do have the full 120 days to turn in final reports for financial reporting and your performance reports. So we do encourage you to, if you can get those reports in any earlier than 120 days, please do so. But of course, it's not required. On an annual basis, they are still due 90 calendar days after each annual performance period of performance ends. And we do ask that you follow our own templates, and please do not create your own. The templates are available on the AMS website for both the FMPP and LFPP programs. The how do I administer a grant section is great. All the templates are on there, as well as instructions for how to fill them out if you need assistance. And we do ask that you submit all your performance reports through the grant solution system, and financial reports will be submitted through the PMS system. And I know the vast majority of you will submit your reports on time, but we do have process to follow for consistently late reports. It might impact your funding in the future if reports are never turned in, or if they're always very late. So please do try to get those in on time. And as I mentioned a minute ago, here's a great link for how you access the report templates, as well as when you bring up the website, what it's going to look like. it should be the same for both FMPP and LFPP program pages, and it'll be under the how to administer the grant section. And as you can see there, the first section has a link to the terms and conditions for various years, because they do tend to change from year to year. So please make sure that you are referencing the most current terms and conditions. And the bottom section has the two required documents for payment requests, the SF-270 and request for advance or reimbursement, as well as the program worksheet where you would list your detailed budget for payment. And just another note on final performance and financial reports, they should cover the entire performance period of the grant. Don't report on if it's 2 years past since the grant has started. Don't report on 2 years. It should just cover the current period of performance. Just to say again that they are due 120 calendar days after the performance period ends. And please do make sure that the report is complete. Outcomes and indicators should be discussed, and staff will, although we do review these reports, we're not going to take any freedom to make any editorial changes. So if things are unclear, we might have to ask you to revise if all the outcomes and indicators aren't fully discussed. The next section is Acknowledgement of Support. We do encourage you to share your project work publicly. Many recipients do want to acknowledge USDA support, which we do encourage. So we give you language here for just to standardize expressing that that support. We also ask that the USDA symbols and logos are for official use only. So please try to limit the use of those without permission. If you do want to use the USDA logo, you can do that. Just seek written approval from us, and email is fine for that. Property management. We do know that many of you will purchase property or manage property, which will require insurance coverage under a federal award. If equipment isn't required, we do ask that you do keep property records, which includes a description of the property, a serial number, or any identification number that you want to use internally, the source of funding, who holds the title, the acquisition date, and how much the property costs. We also want you to track the percentage of federal participation on the project costs. So if there are outside funding sources, what percentage of federal award was used for that piece of property. And when it is time to end your project and wind down the project activities, there are some closeout procedures that we do ask you to follow. All closeout materials must be submitted 120 calendar days after the performance period, which the previous chart, which we detailed there, the due dates for those performance reports. I don't think I need to mention this again. I did before. It is rare, but sometimes we do have to withhold funding for future grants based on reports that weren't turned in. So I just wanted to go over that with you. And here's a list of what closeout documents we do require. We require a final performance report, a final financial report. We call that an SF-425. When you request payment, the two required items will be the SF-270 and the AMS budget worksheet. If unused funds exist at the end of the grant, section 14.2 will tell you how to return those unused funds to the Treasury. And if you do have tangible property, how to submit that SF-428. Some final thoughts on closeout. Timeliness matters in submitting closeout files. We do want to get grants closed out within a certain time frame, and we're actually required to close out grants within a certain time frame. We also want to track for our own agency's purposes, just so we can. So we do want to work with you to ensure complete closeout. We do an official notice of closeout when all the materials are reviewed and submitted and approved, as long as we don't have any further questions. And Section 2 CFR 200.333 does provide guidance on how long you should retain those records. Remedies for non-compliance. Unfortunately, we do have sometimes when recipients aren't in compliance with federal grant requirements. So here are some things that might happen if that happens with the award. We could disallow costs. We could withdraw approval of authorized personnel, withhold payments. Future grant applications could not be funded, or otherwise support would be withheld. If the grant is still active, we could suspend or terminate the grant. We could apply specific conditions that we're legally entitled to do under 2 CFR 200.207, such as requiring additional reporting, requiring payment as reimbursement. You know, if we feel like the project is way off track, or if the reporting isn't up to par, we can require those reports before we get payment to you. We can require records with all requests, establish additional prior approvals, or require the grantee to obtain management assistance. Those are all tools that the agency has to enforce compliance. And site visits. Those have kind of gone away, as a lot of you might notice if you've been used to federal site visits occasionally for your awards during the COVID-19 pandemic period. A lot of agencies just simply didn't do them, but they will be resuming site visits starting next year. And it kind of varies by agency, but it is an important compliance tool that we do want to use. And with the pandemic getting more under control, those should be resuming. So AMS does conduct periodic site visits, usually at our own expense. Basically, this is to review project accomplishments, see how progress is going. See if there's any questions you have. You can meet face-to-face with one of us, or whoever's on the team, and it's a good time to just address questions, address whether the progress is sufficient, review the financial and performance records, we'll review your organizational procedures, financial controls, and any technical assistance. That's a great time to get technical assistance directly from us if it's required. We will make every effort to notify you if we do plan a site visit. We will try to give you at least a 2 weeks notice if we are going to come out to visit your project. And at this time, we'd like to see if you have any questions for your grants management specialist. We've covered a lot today, and we hope it's been informative. And we do wish you all the best of luck in your project, and hope this has been a good way to familiarize yourself with the pretty lengthy terms and conditions document. So if there's any questions, we'll go ahead and address those now. Thank you very much.